Red Cross Blood Donation Alert. The Red Cross is facing a severe blood shortage and is urging eligible donors of all types to give now and help avoid delays in life-saving medical care for patients. More donations are needed to replenish and the extraordinary blood needs of hospitals and patients right now. Be a hero to a patient in need. Use the Blood Donor app. Visit redcrossblood.org or call 1-800-RED-CROSS to make an appointment to help save lives.
The history of Air America lives here. This is WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
This is AP News. I'm Rita Foley. It's a moment to choose democracy over autocracy. That's what President Biden will say today as he talks about voting rights.
Okay, Cosme.
Secretary Jen Psaki.
The president will forcefully advocate for protecting the most bedrock American rights, the right to vote and have your voice counted in a free, fair, and secure election.
But some civil rights activists will not be there when the president speaks in Georgia. They say they want action, not talk. Students in Chicago could be back in class. The city and its teachers have agreed on COVID safety protocol plan.
COVID-19 safety protocol that will allow classes in the district to resume Wednesday. The two sides have been in a standoff cancellation for 4 days as of Monday. The full deal still requires approval by the union's 25,000 members. Details of the agreement were not exactly disclosed, but issues had included metrics that would lead to school closures amid virus outbreaks and expanded COVID-19 testing.
The National Weather Service is warning of dangerously cold wind chills today in parts of the Northeast. It'll feel like minus 40 in some places. Temperatures below zero, not including the wind chill, are expected in parts of Vermont.
All right, I have the Reverend on the line.
Okay, let me bring him up.
City.
He's
Okay, Reverend.
Santita.
Hey, hon, how are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Just trying to get to heaven.
Aren't we all?
Honey, you keep on living long enough, my mother's going to tell you ain't. And she's going. Your mama's going, your daddy's going, y'all, we ain't going.
We ain't making it.
You ain't making it. You got too many needs. Oh my gosh. I'm not going to say anything about my mama here. I'm like, okay, Mom, but that's all right. We're going to leave this alone. Oh my gosh. Whew. So, but thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Got a lot to talk about. You know what?
How's your health been?
I'm sorry?
I said, how's your health been?
You know, my health has been great. It's been great. My allergies have been driving me crazy.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's just like, whew. There are just times when I am like, whoa, what is going on here? You know?
Understood.
And it's just, I just think it's just the time, you know? I mean, but I am, whew. But, you know, it stayed warm for so long. That was the only thing to which I could attribute it. You know, that it got warm. You know, it was unseasonably warm. So I was like, oh, what is going on here? Because I had no scratchy throat, none of that, right? Well, you know what I did? I took Allegra, because I always keep some Allegra and you know these allergy medicines. And literally within minutes, sneezing stopped. I said, oh, okay. So now that's part of my regimen in the morning to take some Allegra, you know, just to stop sneezing. So anyway,
yeah.
So there is that, honey. There is that. But you know, my father went down to. It's interesting. He went down to Georgia today. I didn't realize that President Biden and Vice President Harris were giving speeches today. Yeah, I didn't know they were doing that. So it's kind of. But then you have these other groups who are protesting, and I think rightly so. They're like, but it's interesting when we said last year, well, 2 years ago now, when during the primaries, we need to get behind Bernie. These same groups were telling us why Biden was going to work. And I was like, I said, Biden can work, but you're going to have to work him much harder. Bernie is the guy who's going to fight for you. And you're going to have to push him to do that, because when you get into office, which is what I've been saying about Lori Lightfoot, all of this talk about the mayor.
30 seconds.
I support the teachers union. That having been said, it's like, y'all, when you get into office, it's a whole different deal.
Yeah, a lot of stuff changes.
Everything changes.
15 seconds.
You look up, and all the people who voted against you are your very best friends, because they run this town. It's just how it is.
5 seconds.
So, hey, Paula. Hey, Angela. Let me go back. Linda, Andre, Francis, Shirley.
Change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, and change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you today, Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. Yes, we can change the world, and we're going to do it. Starting today, our teachers return to school here in Chicago, and the students return tomorrow. We're going to be talking with Commissioner Brandon Johnson and Doctors Shanina Knighton and Deborah Furholden about that. What does that mean? But, the shifting COVID rules from the CDC have even Sonny Hostin from The View saying, I don't really believe them. So we got to talk with them about that, about what it is that we need to be doing. But what was agreed upon with between the CTU and the city of Chicago, and where do we go from here, and how can we get those we have 300 schools that have had their air ventilation systems upgraded, but only 17 of the 300 have had upgrades. How can we get the other 283 upgraded? But to me, that should be part of the discussion, right? So let's talk about that. I want to hear from you today here on WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. You can text me at that number as well. I want to hear your voices today. What do you think about this agreement that has been reached between the CTU, the teachers, and the city of Chicago? And what about, I think that we see this all differently. I've seen some affluent people on television pushing to get our kids back in school. And of course, we all want that. They're like, 75%. I saw a woman on CNN last night, 75% of my children's school vaccinated. My children are vaccinated. Number one, she was speaking from home, which means she has internet and she had WebEx, which means there is some affluence. Somebody's got a job in there. Many of the people who we represent don't have that luxury. I wish they had taken a crew to Inglewood. How about that? What about to Austin? What about to Lawndale? What about to Roseland? Think about that, everybody. So we've got to talk about that today. And then we've got John Nichols talking about the January 6th insurrection. He's also going to have a special tribute to Sir Sidney Poitier. And David Daley is going to be talking to us about the vote. Of course, President Biden and Vice President Harris will be in Atlanta today, speaking to Atlantans in John Lewis's home district about the importance of the vote and all that he's going to do to push for it. There are many groups, Black Voters Matter among them, who are saying, you know what? No, we're not going to attend. We don't want a photo op. We need real change. You should be in Washington. So I want to know what your thoughts are about that. So let's get to some of these headlines so we can get to the good news with teaching pastor of the Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope, the Brilliant and the Anointed, Pastor Stephen Thurston II. All right, everybody, Tuesday, January 11th, 2022, Chicago will have a high of 34 degrees. We will get above freezing, and it will be a sunny day. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 33 degrees. partly cloudy. The Dow closed down 162 points yesterday. The Nasdaq closed up 6 points. The S&P 500 closed down 6. Well, last night was a big night in college football, the college championship. College football championship was played, and guess what? Georgia bested Roll Tide Alabama 33-18. Who could believe it, everybody? The first time in 41 years that the Georgia Bulldogs have gotten a college football title since 1980. Oh my gosh, I wasn't even in college then. Oh my gosh, unbelievable. It's been a couple of generations. Congratulations to Georgia. I can't wait till an HBCU wins one of those classics. With all the great work that Deion Sanders is doing down in Mississippi, I think that is a possibility, not just a possibility, a probability. It's going to be real one day, real soon. In the NBA, the Timberwolves will be playing the Pelicans, and the Pistons will be facing off against Chicago. And in the NHL, the Chicago will be playing the Blue Jackets. The spread of the Omicron variant is putting a strain on the U.S. health network all across the country, everybody. Hospitalizations are reaching a level not seen since last winter. But interestingly enough, a lot of people are being hospitalized with COVID, but not because of COVID. We're going to have to ask Dr. Deborah Holden about that. What does that mean? What does that mean? If you are experiencing some kind of symptoms of anything, what should you do, everybody? Chicago teachers will be back in school today, and their students will be back in school tomorrow for in-class learning. After having reached an agreement, the city and the Chicago Teachers Union voted to end the teachers' work action over COVID-19 mitigation measures. More than 340,000 students will be going back to school. But we're going to see what else has been agreed upon and what other mitigation measures will be taken to keep our children and everyone who works in the system safe, everybody. Anti-war voices over in Europe are denouncing the knighting of ex-British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Outrage continues to swell over the recent decision to give him a knighthood. He was instrumental, of course, in the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and the people of the UK in particular have not forgotten it, and they are very, very angry about it, and they are saying the Stop the War Coalition said, we will protest at this grotesque award in the name of the Iraqis, the Afghans, the families who lost soldiers, the refugees, and the victims of these and subsequent wars. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. People just can't stop, don't stop, won't stop. And as I shared with you, The View's host, Sunny Hostin, said she no longer trusts the CDC guidelines. She said, I'm really concerned about this new CDC guidance. I know the science is evolving. I know our knowledge is evolving. But now the CDC is saying that after 5 days of being infected, you don't have to test negative. You can go out. You can go back to work and just wear a mask. I don't believe that. What are your thoughts? Call me at 773-763-9278. There's It's good to hear your voice today.
Good to hear your voice. Happy New Year to you.
Unbelievable. Can you believe God has let us see yet another year? Thank you, thank you, thank you.
One more can, one more chance.
One more again. Glad to be in this service one more time.
One more time. we going all the way to church today, huh?
Do you hear me? And we are going all the way back. But what can two PKs do? Come on now.
Exactly. That's what we know.
Never thought we'd really enjoy all those times that we were made to go to church. But
that's right. Held hostage.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I'll say this to you before my brother Jonathan is going to say, I can't believe you said this. When your father took over the pastorship of his church, of your grandfather's church, really this historic church, we love the Thurstons. You all have been preaching for generations. That Christmas of 1980, we went to the church. And, we were teenagers having fun, even just sitting up in the house talking all night long. My father kept saying, remember, we got to go to church in the morning. Oh, okay. So, you're up till 1, 2 in the morning. Oh, no, my father rolled in at 7:30. Breakfast is ready. It's time to get ready for church. We were like, I said, okay. Jonathan could never stay awake through sermons. No, he couldn't. So you know what he made him do? He made him sit in your father's seat through the sermon.
Gosh.
Your father thought it was
With
funny.
all eyes on him.
All eyes on him. And my father said, my son can stay up to party, but church is a problem. We'll see if it's a problem today. Son. Oh my goodness, I gave you some funny news, and now you can give us some good news.
Yes, ma'am. Well, listen, you start off the show with your theme song that talks about the world. I want to challenge us to engage in some climate change. If some of our listeners might be old enough to remember this, released on December 25th, 1941, Irving Berlin's White Christmas. It was used to shine a light on a dark moment in American history, as just 18 days prior, the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service engaged in a surprise military strike on Pearl Harbor. And that song was used to evoke visions of holidays past and attempt to change the climate of grief in a country that was marred with mourning. And while the song possessed a patriotic purpose, the sad reality is that it was also the product of personal pain, as the lyrics centered around the death of Berlin's infant son, who passed away on Christmas Day just 13 years prior. And it's been suggested that penning these lyrics served as a coping mechanism for this grieving father, a means by which to shift his personal climate of pain. And speaking of a White Christmas, Santita, those seem to be harder and harder to come
in Chicago.
As a result of it. Yes. When we look at the impact of climate change, rising temperatures have been eating away at the chances for snowfall on Christmas over the last decade or so. And the science suggests that if we don't become more proactive in reducing our CO2 emissions over the next few years, pretty soon somebody's going to have to rewrite that song. Those lyrics are now going to say, I'm dreaming of a warm Christmas, unlike the ones I used to know. And the interesting part about climate change is that shift can be so subtle that by the time we look up, what we get is much different than what we expected. And here's what we have to understand about climate change. Climates don't change minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, or season to season. Climate is determined by the average of the weather over time and space. And if climate change is going to change, there will need to be both natural and anthropogenic factors or human-induced factors that contribute to the climate change. And I think that we can all agree that from our professional lives to our personal lives to the political space we're in to the environment, climate change is needed and climate change is necessary. But for climate change to take place, is going to require the active participation of those that exist within those ecosystems. Simply stated, change is a verb, and if nothing changes, nothing changes. And when we look at change in our lives, we have to be honest that change is going to cause disruption, and no matter how much you know the change needs to take place, there's going to be a grieving process as well. And that's the sticky point. Because at that point in the grieving process, it can lead us to either go back to familiar bondage or stand still in stagnation in the process. And so listen, with climate change, we've got to exhibit some courage. Courage to tell the truth, make decisions, make mistakes, say no, and even show up every day. Last night was a big time in football, so let me give a football story as I close out today. It was in the season of 2007 for the New York Giants. They gone 8-8, but then they came back the next year in the Super Bowl of 2008, and they upset the world because they defeated the undefeated New England Patriots. And when Coach Tom Coughlin was asked how he did it, here was his answer, Santita. He said, by being nice. See, after the 2007 season, the coach met with his veteran players. They told him, you yell too much, communicate too little, and you listen barely at all. Coach Coughlin had spent the past 3 years trying to change his players, and it didn't work. So he decided to change himself, and that's what changed the climate of the team, and his players began to change. Coach recognized the change was a verb. And like the Giants, you, me, and the listening audience can walk away with a championship in our personal lives, professional lives, and yeah, even our spiritual lives if we'd engage with the curiosity, creativity, and courage that's needed to make climate change in our lives. There's this brilliant author I know, Santita, who wrote a book entitled Mirror Moments. And he says in that book, if you'll change what's within, you'll then be able to change what's around.
Amen. 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 Your world changes when you change. Stop waiting on
That's it.
everybody else. Ooh, the storm is within us, huh? Absolutely.
It's it.
And
Yeah.
things really do change when you decide that you're going to see something differently. When you see someone
That's it.
differently, wow. When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you. And when you're frowning, guess what? That's all you see.
Yes. Yes.
Ooh, mirror moments. When are you going to be preaching again? When can we see you?
Oh man, you just missed me. I preached this past Sunday. I don't have the schedule set yet for my next engagement, but I'll let you know definitely when I'm back in the pulpit.
You know what? You know what? I know it. Ooh, I love the Thurstons. Really great preachers, great servants. And you've been doing it for a century. And we just thank God for you. Boy, baby.
Thank you.
That is what Dr. King called his
That's
granddad. Because he, like his grandson, does not age.
We don't age.
Stephen, your dad and your granddaddy look like y'all did. You
Yes,
look like
ma'am.
you 20. It's unbelievable. You boy baby too. Oh
That's it.
boy. Bless your heart. Bless your heart. Pastor Stephen Thurston, everybody. Get mirror moments. What's your website, Pastor Thurston?
Stephen with the PH. StephenJThurston.com.
Amen to that. Love you so much. Thank you for being with us.
Love you too.
Absolutely. And
Love you. Appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate you. And we have some more good news today, everybody. The kids are going back to school. The teachers are going back to school. I just hope that these remediation measures, so that they can be safe in the schools. We have to continue to push for those. We have to continue to push. We've got Dr. Deborah Holden, our health guru here on the Santita Jackson Show, epidemiologist and the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University School of Medicine. And this young woman she's brought to us, Dr. Shanina Knighton, registered nurse, infection preventionist from Case Western Reserve University. Ladies, I'm so glad to be with you today. I've got a question for you. I have a question for Dr. Holden and a question for Dr. Knighton as we get things started. At the bottom of the hour, Commissioner Brandon Johnson will be joining us talking about going back to school. And I certainly cannot wait to get these two doctors to weigh in on that. Dr. Deborah Holden, The View. So many of us are fans of that wonderful show. Sunny Hostin said she no longer trusts the CDC. She said, I'm really concerned about these new CDC guidelines. Quote, I know the science is evolving. I know our knowledge is evolving. But now the CDC is saying that after 5 days of being infected, you don't have to test negative. You can go out. You can go back to work and just wear a mask. I don't believe that. I think that after 5 days, if you're not testing, you can certainly still be infectious. And what's interesting is that you have a lot of people who are accusing the CTU, the teachers here, of not trusting science. And the thing is, in the meantime, many of them are getting sick. What about where should we be? Where should we be with what the CDC are telling us? How should we function? I know I ask you this every day, but every day people ask a question of you, so they ask me to ask you, so here you are.
No, and I appreciate it. I'd rather people be asking questions than just simply rejecting everything that the CDC says, or accepting everything that they say if it doesn't jive for them. I mean, people have their own, kind of gut and instincts, and you have to go with those. But at the end of the day, that's what you've got. We're asking people to make decisions that, are going to impact their lives, good, bad, or indifferent, and so I think it's good for people to question. I think that the statement that she made reflects the sentiment of a lot of people. We have been looking at the CDC throughout this entire pandemic as a beacon of light and information and hope and all of that. And we had a lot of, we felt like the CDC got muzzled in the previous administration, right? And again, I don't know how much of this stuff people remember, but at some point I started doing screen grabs of what I saw on the CDC website, because as fast as something would go up, it would come down. And without the screen grab, I would have no way to prove or demonstrate that it was there. Or as I've been trying to track the language of the pandemic and track the recommendations and other things of the pandemic, I didn't have the capacity to do that because these things aren't getting memorialized. So I started memorializing it myself, doing screen grabs. There was a point when, what was the thing that they were saying? They were saying, I don't remember, but my point is, what they had said has evolved so much. They have put things up, and then literally 45 minutes later, it's come down. That happened in the previous administration, and we all blamed it on the administration. Now what we see happening is a little bit different, right? Supposedly now they've got the freedom to let it rip, swing wide, swing hard, let people know what's really going on, put the science out there, fearlessly and boldly. And then they're saying and doing things that don't really make sense. They change recommendations and guidelines with no warning, no notice, and no rationale as to why. I still have yet to hear why after 5 days, if you don't have, and I don't even know what that means if you don't have symptoms, because most people that I know that have had COVID, even once your main symptoms resolve, you oftentimes will have weeks before you feel back to yourself, before you are 100%.
But Dr. Verholden,
I think what we're seeing,
if I can interrupt you here, many of us prior to the pandemic were accustomed to going to work not feeling 100%, right? So I think that's when that becomes even more dangerous, right? Because most of us are accustomed to not feeling 100% and we just push on. And that's a real thing with Black women in particular. We just keep on pushing.
It's a real thing, and it's always been a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
The notion that this is new information, that if you're sick you should stay home, is a problem too. I think Dr. Knight says, I don't want your COVID or your cold. People say things like, oh, it's just a cold. It's like, well, even still. But I do understand it. And here's the thing that we've also figured out, right, is that during this pandemic, a lot of times people aren't doing stuff because they don't care. Most people don't go to work with a cold because they especially in healthcare, because they want to be on their feet, not feeling well, potentially getting other people sick. They do it out of necessity because they don't have the paid time off, or the little paid time off they have to reserve for sick children or illness that's like debilitating enough where getting out of bed is very difficult, and things like that. So people oftentimes get forced into these scenarios where they have to make choices that aren't necessarily the choices that they prefer, but the choices that they have to make given what their circumstances are. So we are still ongoingly missing the opportunity to be better and do better during this pandemic. I said very early on when we were talking about people getting vaccinated, people should have a COVID vaccination paid day off. Joe Biden was willing to throw $100 at everybody, or $50, and then $100 at everybody to get the jab in the arm, but couldn't throw a paid day off at them. Why should somebody get the vaccine and feel down, right? A lot of people got the vaccine, felt sluggish, felt tired, fight the fever, etc., and we have to get vaccinated and then keep working. So there were things that we could and can do that I think will make this better for people, but the CDC really owes us to stand up, be true to the science, and when they say and do things that contradict what has been said in the past, to explain to people why, or to own this is not ideal, this is not the science, this is the recommendation that we're making that practically will meet us in the middle. Just be honest about what it is.
That's all.
But they know we see them as the science, and they speak as if it's the science, when a lot of it now just is not.
Science does not make you God. I mean, this is becoming, they've got to do better. Not do better, they've got to do right. So much is being driven by other agendas, and I would suspect that you're also seeing a lot of debates that are happening internally spill out into the public. And yet we're not supposed to debate about any of this. We've got to do right. We've got to open up the dialogue. We have to have transparency. And as information, as things evolve, as things change, let's talk about it. But you know what? I tell you what, I don't want someone who's asymptomatic, who's feeling all right, breathing over me. What about you? Call me at 773-763-9278. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Dr. Deb.
Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Yep, good morning.
Good morning. Do we have Dr. Knighton there?
Yeah, she's there.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. You all sound like such lovely teachers. I'm going to give you a question before we go to Commissioner Johnson, because I want you all to weigh in on the safety of schools, just generally speaking. Linda wants to know about the efficacy of these UV sterilization machines for masks. And so I want to cue you up on that. Because, we're told we can just put our masks on, on these infrared lights and everything is fine.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm going to answer her question, but I, again, am one of those individuals that's always thinking into the future. Just how I mentioned before, you see the whole chronic conditions data is coming out now, which is even something that I emphasize in my infographics of who is really at highest risk, which is a whole nother topic. But I'm specifically saying that
I have Brandon Johnson on the line.
any data that talks about we know the UV associated with cancer. Let's just say that.
This is a lot. Oh, Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
How are you? See, I'm not going to have to wake you up. Well, you're already up, because you know you don't sleep. Well, we got to have you back, but I won't have to have you on like this every single day, bless your heart.
I was really shocked yesterday when the one caller called in and the statement that he made about teachers and the Chicago teachers, like that they just don't want to go to work. I was really shocked.
Don't be shocked, because you know what? If you saw CNN last night, I reached out to Commissioner Johnson about this. It was really bothered me. They're using affluent parents in Chicago. They're conducting interviews with them, and they're saying that my children are vaccinated, my school is safe, my school, my everybody, 75%. This woman who was on Aaron Burnett's show last night, I heard her, but I said, clearly somebody in your house has got a job because you've got internet and you've got a computer and you're on WebEx or Cisco. So what are you talking about? Would you all please go to Lawndale or Austin or Roseland? Inglewood, by the way, they have a life expectancy, Dr. Verholden and Dr. Knighton, that is 30 years. They live 30 fewer years. These black people live 30 fewer years than the white people in the North Shore. They barely make it to 60. Okay?
Yeah, that's common all across the country.
Yeah.
This is like square in my lane. We look at it, and some places in New York and even in Baltimore, you got a distance as few as 3 or 4 miles that equates to a change in life expectancy of 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate. Where you live shouldn't determine the quality of life
30 seconds.
you can expect to live. That is just like privilege at its finest. But most people don't acknowledge that, especially the people who are living with the privilege of living in wealth and living in an affluent community and all that comes with that.
Well, the fact that she was tone deaf on what so many people in Chicago are living
10
with.
seconds.
I'm going to come to you, Dr. Knight, and then I've got to run right to Commissioner Johnson to the headline of the day. Stand by, please.
We can change the world, change the world, change change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, sending special love to Chad Larson and all my family up there today, and Pastor McAfee and Gary Hines and Sounds of Blackness, whose music you just heard. Everybody. The headline today, the kids are on their way back to school in Chicago, and the teachers will be in school today, getting ready for in-class learning. Before we get to Commissioner Brandon Johnson, Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson, who has been a teacher in our schools, who has children in our schools, who has been an active member of the CTU, a leader in it. Let me go to you. We've just been hearing from Dr. Deborah Verholden about how we're supposed to process these CDC guidelines, but someone has a question for you about these UV systems that we're told can clean our masks. And now we're trying to figure out how to clean KN95, N95 masks or cloth masks. Are these UV lights, do they clean our masks?
So they are effective. It also, too, depends on the amount of exposure of UV that's said to clean the actual item, too. So there are more entities that go into that. The time that it takes to clean it, then a recovery time afterwards, so after it's been cleaned by UV. And I'll just tell the public that, to me, the skepticism of it is not that it doesn't work, but what are the unintended consequences? We know UV, even in exposure, like let's say sunbathing, or we talking about sunlight, has the unintended consequence of cancer. And so the question then comes, is it better to just get another disposable one? Is it better to just launder your mask and know that it'll be safe, or is the convenience worth the risk? So that would be my only feedback regarding that.
Can you wear an N95 or KN95 mask more than once, or is it a one-time use mask?
So I'm going to tell you based off of my training as well as what I was doing pre-pandemic, and it was not recommended that you wore that mask more than once. Because of the pandemic conditions, it's, wear it up to X amount of days and then change it. But to my understanding and what I'm still sticking by is that it is not for everyday use. It is not a multi-use situation. You should wear it, and then, as some have mentioned, you can sit it out for 5 days and then rotate it back in, and maybe all of the germs that were on there, meaning if it was some viral germs, then maybe they've dissipated, and you can rotate it again back in. But no, it is not. It's never been recommended that we wear those masks more than once. It's just in the current times that we're in that you're seeing guidelines change and people doing it, but I still do not recommend it as a safety measure.
Is there any mask that you can wear more than once? Very quickly, and I think this is something that that the commissioner needs to hear as our children go back to school tomorrow.
No, there are no masks that you should be wearing more than once, even if you cannot visibly see fungus, bacteria, or viral shedding on a mask. It does not mean that those particles do not exist. And then the other piece of it is, especially when we're talking about disposable masks, on the side of the box, there is a recommendation in regards to the length of wear. If the length of wear says 2 hours, don't wear it more than 2 hours. If it says 4, no more than 4. If it says 8, no more than 8 hours. If it is worn longer than the time that is indicated, it can no longer guarantee your safety.
Well, you know what? We need to get some straight answers, and really, they need to come down on the cost of these masks. But these masks are not cheap. They're not cheap. They're not cheap. And now we're told that the most expensive masks are the ones that we really, really need. Unbelievable. Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson, who hosts his own show here on WCPT, here every Sunday at 9 a.m. I hope you will tune in because it is a magnificent show. right after Keep Hope Alive on Sundays from 7 to 9 on iHeart. Commissioner Brandon Johnson, we got great news. At least we certainly want to see our teachers back in school. We certainly want to see our children back in school. Tell me, what changed between yesterday morning and last night?
Hey, good morning, Santita.
Good morning.
Yeah, this has been a very, and to the panel, of course, they're fabulous and always look forward to these conversations. Last night and the previous nights were very difficult because, again, we were dealing with an administration that was just dead set on not, considering all of the different, mitigating factors that we believe are necessary in order to have, a healthy or the safest environment. So, the bottom line is, we're just talking about masks. And as simple as that may sound, but there was nothing in writing that guaranteed that the workers as well as students would have access to those masks. What we knew was that the city of Chicago had a stockpile of these masks, and they were not making them available. In fact, we literally had to have it written in an agreement that masks would be made available. And so that happened yesterday. We did get some agreement around something I think is actually important. Though there's no citywide metric, and we can dig into that in a little bit, but there are school-based metrics that would provoke a school to flip and go into a pause. And again, I think that's important because as a parent, as this virus continues to spread, and particularly this variant that has been just moving at rapid pace throughout our communities, and some school communities, as you mentioned earlier, like North Lawndale or Austin, the neighborhood that I live in, my wife and I are raising our children. The positivity rate here in Austin is high as 35%. When you're living in communities of working folks and working poor and poor people, the conditions in which we are already suffering through, obviously we know that these conditions just become heightened, as a result of just this pressure that we're experiencing from this virus. So there are some school-based metrics that will provoke a situation that would give the principal the authority to actually move into quarantine, and that was important. The other thing too is, we weren't testing children at a rate that speaks to the volume of this particular variant. Now, it's unfortunate that the city of Chicago did not necessarily acquiesce to the understanding and the benefit of testing. We know that the governor of Illinois offered testing to this administration and other means of support, and for weeks they have been doing this, and the city of Chicago refused the support from the governor, from the state of Illinois.
Why?
Well, since our pressure, that's a great question. And, Santita, if I was not as exhausted, I probably would try to dig into the psyche of this administration. But one thing that I've learned, I'm going to stay out of that space because I don't want to get any more dizzier than I already am. But the part that's actually frustrating is that the county, as well as the city of as well as the state of Illinois, made attempts to this administration to say, hey, look, let's collaborate, let's figure it out. And it just was to no avail. But since the governor has made it available yet again, the city of Chicago has accepted the offer, and we now will have some increased testing at the local level. The other one, which is a little bit of a sticking point, we finally got it figured out. Remember way back when this virus first started, and there was this term and phrase being used as contact tracing? Well, what's fascinating is that as this pandemic has developed and evolved, many of the things and factors that we were adamant about, folks are less adamant about those things nowadays. And so contact tracing was something that the city of Chicago was balking against. And so we did receive some agreement at a local level where educators through what have been referred to as the safety committee would be able to we'll be able to basically have the contact tracing where we can at least be able to reach and see where this virus is coming from in this particular school community, and be able to have some work involved to trace where it could be going so that we can keep people safe. those are the big things that, we really had to work through. And there were the Senate president in the state of Illinois, the Speaker of the House in the state of Illinois, many alderpersons, state reps and state senators, Cook County commissioners like myself. We were all on one accord as it relates to the proposals, even the Principals Association, all on one accord in terms of the proposals that we saw as necessary in order to create the safest environment for our children. There was only one person that had an issue with it. And somehow her team was able to finally convince her. Our positions, for the most part, remained. There were some, back and forth between a specific number. For instance, for a metric level, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but up until Saturday, really, quite frankly, when Reverend Jackson, began to lend his support as well, this mayor was just dead set. She saw it one way. And, fortunately, the entire political ecosystem in the rest of the country who've been saying repeatedly that we don't want to die and that Black lives actually should matter, and they do, that she was finally able to come to terms with things we've been proposing, quite frankly, for several months. I know that was a lot, Santita, but that's
no, that's fine. But because all of these lives matter. One of the challenges that I see is, I told you, I want to follow the money, because I know that there are a lot of corporate interests that need these children in their seats, and they need people in the buildings because they have food contracts, they have janitorial contracts, and they don't get paid if people are not in the building, and unless you have a pay or play contract. It's so I'm looking at all of those pieces. Because you can see from what the CDC is doing, you can see from what we're experiencing all over the country, Commissioner Johnson, that this is the same problem. It's just a different city, And I'm just trying to find out. We had this dynamic CTU leader and teacher up in the STEM program at Inglewood High School, Mike Smith, who you brought to us, and I'm so grateful that you made us aware of his presence. He's such a dynamic young man. To hear that there are 300 schools in Chicago and only 17 of them have had their air ventilation systems upgraded. That is there a discussion about getting the other 283, if my math serves me correctly, upgraded?
Yeah, that's right.
Everything
that's
is not all right.
Point. No, it's still not. And I think that's the part that's actually quite, it's unfortunate. It can be discouraging, but, as Reverend always says, you don't ever win a fight unless you actually get in one. I'm paraphrasing, but, there's still ventilation issues. We've raised that. I think the point that you're making is something that has to continue to be stated. There are very much economic interests tied to our public schools and to public accommodations in general. And there are folks that eat off of those contracts at the expense of working people. And to your point, that's folks from all across the city. And when it comes to even the rationale behind the mayor of Chicago not accepting the help from the governor, I'll just be very direct here. Part of the expectation for the help that the governor was releasing was that, the city would have to pay for it. Because, there's something called double dipping in government, and, we can't be characterized as such, and quite frankly, it's illegal. And so what we have discovered is that there are $2 billion that's allocated for the city, for the Chicago public schools alone. We know that they have at least $1 billion of that. There is no record, there's no transparency that those dollars have gone into not just eliminating the threat or reducing the threat of COVID, but those dollars have not gone towards the type of innovation that's necessary that we knew we needed before the pandemic, like a nurse in every school. The west side of Chicago, where I live on, Santita, there's one librarian for the entire west side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. The type of instability and the disinvestment and the chaos that has been going on in our public school system, as you know, for decades. You're finally in a position where you can begin to address those inequities, and there is no indication that those dollars are going towards that. And there is very much an economic structure that's tied to this that, quite frankly, we know that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King referred to it as one of the three evils. And capitalism has certainly run amok in this pandemic. There's a buddy of mine whose son has gotten into acting. He has his first big gig, Santita, but the gig is in they're doing the recording in China.
Mm-hmm.
According to China, before he can step foot in that studio, he has to quarantine for 21 days.
Absolutely, this is the challenge. Okay. We've had opportunities. We don't have a plan to educate all American children. That's why when my brother, Congressman Jackson, was in Congress, he constructed an amendment to the U.S. Constitution to guarantee equal access to equal high-quality education for every American child. You know, that's why there was a mad scramble to get a seat at Whitney Young. This predates you, Commissioner Johnson. When I applied, mad scramble. Because you had a whole lot of kids, but you didn't have these schools that had the best resources. You had one, and then you had Kenwood, and you had South Shore, Lynn Bloom, Lane. You can name them. We don't have a real emphasis on educating our children safely and well, whether it's academic or vocational. And I think we've got to deal with that because I repeat, you still have more than 280 schools that do not have an air ventilation system that's been upgraded. And I do hope that even as the teachers return to school, as the kids return to school, that the fight will continue because things are still not right, Commissioner Johnson. They're not right. They were not right under Emmanuel. They were not right under Harold Washington. They were not right under Eddie Daly. They haven't been right for a long time. They just ain't been right. Now, when are we going to get them right?
And see, that's the statement. That's the question we all should be asking. And quite frankly, look, I think that was the hope that many voters had when they voted for Mayor Lightfoot. Now, obviously, that sentiment has changed and it continues to change.
They had that. They had those thoughts. They had that hope under Rahm Emanuel. We knew that wasn't going to happen. They always had that hope. But what can we do? Now, what can we do to make this right?
So one of the things that we have to continue to celebrate. Look, for the first time in the history of this city, we're going to be able to elect our board members.
Okay.
Folks have to start getting ready now. That's something that every administration, as I've said before, from Daley to Harold to this current administration, did not want to relinquish that control. And so we have an elected school board for the first time. Of course, it's not a panacea, but it certainly is a start in the right direction. I think the second thing is we have to continue to strengthen our local school councils. These are the spaces where educators, students, and parents have the ability to give direction for their school communities. And then I think finally we have to continue to be prepared to take action, like the one that educators just took. That there's no demand that has ever been met without sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Teachers lost 4 days of pay, Santita. We're not talking about it, but they have
a week.
You know what I'm saying? An entire week of pay in order to get an agreement that we've been fighting for the last several months. And so, look, we don't have the well-rounded curriculum like you're talking about. I happen to have a son, he's 14. He's looking at being a Dolphin, Santita, but he's also looking at Kenwood. But the fact that we have to shop around the city of Chicago, working-class families, to find a school that has music, art, sports, all the different things that you need to have a well-rounded education. And unfortunately, in the city of Chicago, and quite frankly, across the country, every school is not equipped to deal with the different talents or even the expectations and desires of our children. And so pushing for democracy, which we have that secure now. Let's get ready to do that. That's in just a little bit over a year away. Pushing for local school councils. Every single school has one. We just fought in Springfield to get a law passed that the city of Chicago would no longer make LSCs basically impotent because they were taking away the authority if they were classified as probation, which is another wicked term, of course, to continue to lift up the industrial complex of this prison wicked system. And so then I think, again, take action, speaking to elected officials, challenging elected officials like myself. Santita, I'm in board meetings this week. This Thursday, I'm going to vote on the first set of the $1 billion that Cook County received. And there's an allocation, and there's transparency, there's engagement for every single dollar. And my expectation is that my constituents hold me to account Folks call me every single day, Johnson, what are we doing with that building? What are we doing with it? Where is it going? How is it dealing with violence prevention? How is it dealing with healthcare disparities? And that is the right of people. There's big D democracy, Santita, then there's small d.
And you know
People
what
should
needs to
vote for
happen?
me to represent them at the table, and they need to be at the table.
And what you need to do, you have a space on my show, but you got to come on these shows and let people know what you're voting on. The only way that we're going to engage the public is if we educate the public. And that is something that you have to work on every single day. I got that from my civil rights background. You know, push, breadbasket. My father was home 1 day a week, Brandon. 1 day a week, all of my life. Because that's the kind of dedication that it takes to get this work done. This is the way it works. I can't complain about it. Fortunately, he has a wife who has been his partner in this. It takes that kind of work. It takes that kind of dedication. It takes that kind of time. But I want you to start coming on this show and letting us know what you're voting on, what you're fighting for. Because then this audience can call, they can email, they know what to do. Part of the problem is that so much of this happens without transparency, or it happens in darkness, or because we're not thinking about anything until election time. And one of the things that we have learned is that the business is ongoing. And so, look, even as our children go back to school, as our teachers and the janitorial staff and the food staff, as everybody goes, the teachers' aides, as everybody goes back to school, we still have the same problems. They're still there. They're still there. You know, very quickly, Dr. Deborah Furholden, I got about 90 seconds. You're an epidemiologist, but you're involved in the community. What's the path forward as you see it? Because what's happened in Chicago got a lot of shine because it's the third largest school district in the country, but this is happening everywhere.
Yeah, you know, I keep saying to people, it's not like we don't know what the solutions are, right? We might have some disagreement on the scale of them or how they should be rolled out, but we all agree. We know that schools are not conducive for many schools, not all schools, but many schools are not conducive for the kind of safe and supporting learning environments that we want for children, including in times of, you know, a pandemic and crisis. So we know that we need to do some upgrades in our schools. You know, the teachers and administrators have organized and they said, this is what we need. You know, this notion that it's on them that they don't want to go to work, it's just so hard for me to wrap my head around when they're saying, not only do we want to go to work, we want the kids in school, because most of us agree what's best for kids is for them to be in school. So let's put them in schools that really honor them. Mm-hmm. Let's put them in schools that are safe. Let's put them in schools that have all of the resources that they need to learn and be safe and be healthy. And not just the kids and everybody that's in that building. You know, if we're just focused on protecting the kids but not protecting the adults that are, you know, charged with their care and their learning and all of that, we've dropped the ball too. So I think we know what those solutions are. It's about getting that political will to get the resources behind those solutions and not having it be a one-off thing, mm-hmm. not having it be something that's short-term, that is just a quick fix that won't take the opportunity to make the long-term investments that we know we need.
Commissioner Johnson, I'm going to give the last 30 seconds to you. Of course, you catch him every Sunday at 9 a.m. here on WCPT. What do you want us to know? What do you want us to do?
Well, again, thank you. I think parents have made it very clear that they want safe, well-rounded schools. So continue to remain engaged with your elected officials. Continue to talk to your educators and teachers and get their perspective. And let's continue to make sure that whatever we do it in unison. We do it together. So I'm very grateful to Santita for your leadership, giving us access to this space, because it certainly is making a difference as we continue to shape and change the conversation around the world of what children deserve.
Well, I love you and appreciate you and thank you for your dedication. You never stop working. You never stop pushing for our children, for our families, for working people, and for all people. And we just thank you for continuing to find ways to serve. Commissioner Brandon Johnson, everybody. Commissioner Brandon Johnson. Dr. Shanina Knighton. Of course, Dr. Nina.preventionist, drnina.preventionist, and PreventionSavesLives.com. PreventionSavesLives.com. Dr. Deborah Furholden at Dr. Deb Verholden. Follow them, everybody. They really make the best sense. We just thank God for them. Coming up, let's talk about the vote. Vice President Harris and President Biden are in Atlanta today pushing for the vote. Should they be in Washington, though? Because that's when the Senate meets. Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show back in a minute. Commissioner Johnson, thank you so much.
Right now, we know that you're someone with a social
He might be gone already. Well, let me, Dr. Knighton and Dr. Verholden.
Yes.
Thank you all so much for everything.
You're welcome. Yeah, they're going back today, Santita. Is that what you said?
The teachers are going back. The students go back tomorrow. And guess what? What concerns me is that the same problems they had that made them walk out last week are still there. You know?
Yeah.
So I'm
Ms.
like,
Jackson, do you want me to bring up Anita?
Yes. Well, let me certainly give her greetings. But that's very concerning to me. Anita?
Yeah.
She's on.
Anita?
Hey, Santita, how you doing?
Hey, sweetie, I have to bring you on during the commercial break because we're running to another topic. What's on your mind? You know I love you and appreciate your support.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that maybe it's actually terrible that they're sending them there with the ventilation bag, especially since I guess it's spread through certain things in the air too.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's why the ventilation matters. So, I mean, they have the mobile units. I mean, they may not be able to teach us much, but with people going to high school, the schools can't do everything, and the parents are leaving too much on the schools anyway. Mm-hmm. So I just suggested the mobile units, the trailers. You know how they have, trailers.
Well, Dr. Knighton, we just want to do it very quickly because I only have a couple minutes here. Dr. Knighton, are trailers safer than a school that has an upgraded air ventilation system?
Upgraded?
I can't quite, there's too many factors that will go into that for me to answer that question. I think the key is just having open ventilation right now without me knowing the details of the even air system that's associated with the trailer.
Okay.
Well, and the one thing I'll say about that is we have to watch this instinct to go for a quick fix, right? So to imagine your house, and this happened to my aunt. Squirrels came down her chimney and took over her house. It was 2 squirrels, and then I guess they let their squirrel buddies know, and it got so bad my aunt ended up leaving her house. By the time she came back, she went and stayed with my uncle. By the time she came back, about 3 months later, the squirrels had taken over her house. We were able to reclaim the house, but the havoc that these squirrels wreaked in her house while she slept in my uncle's basement was crazy. The thing that we need to do is get our schools up to snuff. That's what the only reason I say that is because trailers or these temporary or shorter term solutions would have made better sense to me earlier in the pandemic. Mm-hmm. But here we are nearly 2 years out, still going for the quick fix and not addressing the long-term investments that are needed in our schools. Dr. Deb. And so that's where I just want to keep pointing people back to.
I'm just trying to further your point. And you've got Senator Joe Manchin, who votes to give the Pentagon more than $700 billion they didn't even ask for. We don't even know why we're going to these. We don't even know where we're going when we go fight these wars. We don't even know why we're fighting them. We don't know. We don't know. This is insane. Insane. $700+ billion. What could that have done to America's schools? To make them safe. We have a lead water problem, not just an air ventilation problem. You go to places like Dubai, you go to different cities, you go to Tokyo, you go to cities all over the world, they have got first-rate modern-day infrastructures. People come to the United States and, oh my goodness, they would go through, if you go through LaGuardia Airport, you will be embarrassed in New York. Oh, and don't have a delay. Now, fortunately, they're doing a real build out on LaGuardia. But I'm gonna tell you, I would want to curl up like a fetus in my chair and not move. Ugh.
Yeah.
Santita.
Yes.
Santita.
Yes, sweetie. I got 30 seconds.
Okay. I just wanted to say I stayed at home, and I see so many parents not even taking care of their children. The school still can't solve every problem.
You're right.
And that's why I had maybe they could just do temporary stuff until they fix everything right.
Well, I think we're going to have a real dedication to families. We don't have a family-friendly society. We don't. And we don't have a society that values families. We don't. Family values, you can run on it, but we don't value families. You can look at our budgets and see that. You can look at how we pay people. When people are fighting for 15, when the economist told you 10 years ago you needed $23 an hour in order to keep your head above water in urban America. Come on. We're not serious. We're sending these kids and these teachers back to schools, and we haven't fixed the air ventilation systems. No, something's got it. It doesn't just have to change. Things have to get right. This is not right.
Yeah, the point is well taken, though. It's probably now we need a both and. But I feel like, dang, we already knew that. And why we did a lot of these temporary solutions that I don't, I'm not dogging or diminishing the fact that, if we want to get kids back in the schools right now, we may have to be creative, right? And schools did that. They did things like alternating schedules. So half the kids were in on, Monday, Wednesday, the other half were on Tuesday, Thursday, kept them in clusters. There's all kinds of, but it was like these were supposed to be the things to sort of tide us over while we dealt with the, more long-term solutions, which typically take longer to implement and also have a higher price tag, and we know that. But then that didn't happen. We just kept going with the quick fix and
15 seconds.
Doing the long-range investment. So I agree with the caller in that let's pull out all the stuff.
10.
Okay, do we have David Daly?
But let's have it be both.
Oh, I have McKee up. I'm going to Daly up.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. It's a joy to be with you today. I want to hear from you. 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. You can text me at that number, but I want to hear your voices. What about voting rights, everybody? President Biden is doing a hard pivot to the fight for voting rights. Will he do a carve-out in the filibuster rule to pass voting rights? Will he even be able to get it through? Is it too late? Well, he's going to be speaking in Atlanta today, he and Vice President Harris. So let's talk about that with David Daly and January 6th. Why is it important? Why is it important that we address this as we see these retired Pentagon generals who are saying that we're on the verge of yet another insurrection? Some people even say that we could have a civil war. Wow. So let's talk about this on the Santita Jackson Show, 773-763-9278. I want you to meet me on the Santita Jackson and Friends page at Facebook, not Santita Jackson, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That's where I can receive new friends, and I want you to join me over there. Those of you who've sent out connection requests, please go to Santita Jackson and Friends and meet me at Santita Jackson IG on Instagram and at Santita J on Twitter and on YouTube. Please, everybody switch on over there. Like and subscribe on the Santita Jackson Show, the Santita Jackson Show on YouTube. So let's get to it, everybody. Let us get some of these headlines so we can get right to voting rights. I want to know what you think about the push for voting rights now. Chicago will have a high of 34 degrees. It will be sunny today. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 33 degrees, partly cloudy, but it is still very, very cold out there right now. The Dow closed down 162 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 6 points. The S&P 500 closed down 6 points. There was a big night in college football. Guess who's number one? Georgia. For the first time in 41 years, they have won the college football title, everybody. They beat Alabama, Roll Tide. 33-18. Congratulations to Georgia, everybody. In the NBA, the Timberwolves will be facing off against the Pelicans tonight, and the Pistons will be facing off here in Chicago against the Bulls. The NHL, well, Chicago will be playing the Blue Jackets. So we're going to have some great sports tonight. Everybody, coronavirus. Well, the system is strained, and now it's very interesting. We're seeing people who are being hospitalized with COVID, but not necessarily because of COVID, but still, they're deploying the National Guard all across the country to help shore up short-staffed hospitals, everybody. The spread of the Omicron variant is putting a strain on healthcare networks. But we're just seeing a strain, everybody. More than 141,000 Americans were hospitalized with COVID as of yesterday, according to the Department of Health and Human Services. In Chicago, we're going to see the teachers and the students return to school this week. Teachers return to school today. The students return to school tomorrow after the CTU, Chicago Teachers Union, and the city of Chicago reached an agreement on these health mitigation measures as we are trying to figure out how to live through the pandemic. More than 340,000 students in the country's third largest school system had missed 4 days of classes since teachers voted to teach remotely as they seek ways to make the whole teaching and school ecosystem safe, everybody. And the fight continues, everybody, because the problems that existed last week are still there. So people are saying we don't need even more photo ops, according to many voting rights groups. They said they want President Biden to do more. They said he really ought to be giving this speech on voting rights from Atlanta, not from Atlanta, which is where he's going to be in John Lewis's home district, pushing for the voting rights bill that is named in his honor. They said, no, the Senate actually meets in Washington on Tuesday. So why doesn't he give the speech that he's going to give to people who are to the choir? He's singing to the choir today. So what do you think about that? I want to hear your thoughts, everybody. 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. People like Black Voters Matter. Latasha Brown and others are boycotting the speech. Stacey Abrams, the gubernatorial candidate, is saying, and the voting rights advocate is saying that she has a scheduling conflict. Therefore, she will not be at the speech today. Others will be there today. And so, what do you think? What do you think? Is it too much, too little, too late? What do you think about President Biden's push for voting rights now? Many people are saying that this should be done in honor of the only way you can counteract the forces of January 6th is to get voting rights. But will that work? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. We've got New York Times bestselling author, our friend, brother beloved here, David Daly, the author of Rat Effed and Unrigged. You got to get both of those books, everybody. If you want to see the true story of the secret plan to steal our democracy, get Rat Effed. If you want to see how Americans are battling back to save our democracy, get Unrigged. You don't want to miss these books. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that is what these books have shown us. There has been a plan to take the voting rights of the majority away and have permanent minority rule. And of course, brilliant social scientist from the National Action Network, one of the founders of Operation Push, Dwight McKee. Welcome to the show, both of you. Let's get to it. David Daly, the president is going to be in Atlanta today. And the speech, as we've read excerpts, is really powerful. But there are many voting rights groups who are saying we're not going to even go. We don't need more photo ops. We need a real plan, a real carve out in the filibuster to get voting rights acts, the voting rights bill passed. And yet, we're wondering if we have the votes. Talk to me. What do you think about what's happening today?
What's happening today is what should have been happening from day one of the Biden presidency. We are in a crisis that even the president compares to the most serious challenge our nation has faced since the Civil War. And yet we have not had the focused attention of the White House on this problem over the course of the last
12 months and counting, as state legislatures around the country have made a killing path on voting rights and worked to entrench minority rule and worked really to set themselves up to overthrow the will of the people in 2024 in states like Georgia and Arizona and Texas and Florida, where they have passed draconian bills aimed like a laser beam at communities of color, young voters, Democratic constituencies that would allow for all sorts of new voter ID bills that would add all kinds of new restrictions and barriers before people trying to simply cast a vote that would allow gerrymandered state legislatures to come in and usurp the power to count votes from local county election boards. This is all predicated on a lie, right? It's all predicated on the big lie of Donald Trump's phony election fraud that nobody can actually back up because it didn't happen and it didn't exist. And yet Republicans have been using this for the last 13 months to push these new laws. They've been doing this in reality for the last 10 years, ever since the U.S. Supreme Court in the Shelby County case eliminated preclearance from the Voting Rights Act and allowed all these states with a history of racial prejudice in their voting laws to enact all of these new ones without the permission of the federal government. And we are on a dangerous, dangerous path. The president and the Senate, we need to stand up for democracy now.
What about, is it possible to get a carve out in the filibuster? Well, it's possible to do it, but are the votes there?
Well, there are 48 votes there. There are two Democrats who are holding out, right? Senators Manchin from West Virginia, Senators Sinema from Arizona. They've been publicly opposed, very vocally, very vociferously, to any carve-out in the filibuster rules. But this is why the president and others need to be out there explaining this, because the filibuster is not some constitutional provision that has always been there and always has to be there. It's an arcane Senate rule that stands in the way of majority rule and that has most often been used exactly as it's being used now in order to block action on slavery, on anti-lynching bills, on civil rights. This is the history of the filibuster. This is not a rule that protects the minority. This is a rule that allows the white minority to continue to hold power. And so by changing I'm convinced that if the American public knew what the filibuster actually was, and if the president was out there talking about it every day in a simple and clear way, that the filibuster is what stands in the way of action on all of the issues that the American people care about, that it would be clear and that people would understand. And that's what he hasn't been doing for the last 13 months. That's what the lack of attention to this issue from the White House has meant, that it is allowed Republicans to pretend that the filibuster was handed down by Moses himself on a carved stone a tablet and carried to the U.S. Congress by George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. It's not the case.
Has this lack of action, has it hurt voting rights?
I'm sorry, what?
No, has the lack of action I don't know if it's inattention, but certainly it's been a lack of action. Maybe
Sure.
they were wishing it
Has
away.
the-
Has that hurt the push for voting rights?
There has been no lack of action. The only lack of action has been in Washington, D.C. There has been a lot of action on voting rights in state legislatures around the country, all of it in the wrong direction. And by failing to act nationally, what we're doing is allowing all of these laws that encourage minority rule and suppress the vote to go into effect, and we are creating the real danger that a 2024 election creates the kind of constitutional crisis that we just barely missed on January 6th of 2021. And while we pretend that some supermajority of 60 senators is necessary to take action on this, you've got gerrymandered state legislatures passing all of these voter suppression bills with a simple majority. And many times, those state house majorities are elected with fewer votes because of the way that they've gerrymandered and drawn all of these districts. So we have to stop pretending and start talking straight about what is actually happening.
Dwight McKay, you see a lot of voting rights groups who are pushing back against President Biden's speech today. In fact, they're saying that he should be delivering this speech to the senators in Washington at the U.S. Senate. What are your thoughts?
Well, the time to have pushed back should have been before they gave him the vote. We had this discussion with Latasha back then and asked, what are you willing to put on the line to force these issues? On the front side, you lose your leverage once you put the guy in office, because now he is the president, when you should have put all this on the table before you gave him the vote. It's interesting to me that Biden had no problems interpreting busing when there was a major issue in the Northeast. And we was able to put that whole issue in perspective because he was anti-busing. And he was able to, to fight that case and to state his case. Now that it is an issue dealing with voting rights, he seems to not be so clear in terms of his ability to interpret these issues and put them on the table and to fight the good fight for them. It always leads me to believe, and I've kind of said this before, that he's hiding behind the filibuster issue. For us, voting is not part of the process. Voting is the process. And so if they don't want us to have the right to vote, it's because they want to control the process. And it comes down to not just the Democratic wing of the party, of politics. It comes down to those whites who want to make sure that they maintain superiority in controlling the process. They really want to turn this into South Africa in a state where the minority maintains control of the majority.
Everybody call me. What do you think? 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. Indeed, he underscores your point, David. You said, wait a minute. No. There's not been inactivity on the vote. State after state has enacted. Each state, we're just rolling through the 50 states and the territories, more restrictions on the vote, more restrictions on registration, just lessening access to the vote. What is the way forward? Where do we go from here? I mean, what is he planning to do? Is this going to make a difference?
Yes, absolutely. We've got two bills in Congress that are very strong bills. You've got the Freedom to Vote Act, which would federalize standards so that if you are like me in Massachusetts, or if you are somebody in Mississippi, you've got the same ability to show up and register to vote. A same-day registration, election day holidays, mandated number of days of early voting, and hours every place. The same rules, so that you can't have these kinds of targeted provisions that they come up with in Georgia and Texas and Florida that are surgically aimed at making it harder for communities of color and other Democratic constituencies to cast a ballot. You've got strong protections on anti-gerrymandering in here. You've got the Senate Bill 4 is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which would restore preclearance to the VRA that the Supreme Court eliminated back in 2013. Back in 2013, John Roberts said that, well, it's not 1965 anymore in the South, and we can't keep forcing states to live by the standards of the bad old days of the past. It's like it isn't like that anymore. And so they listed the preclearance bills that had provisions that had forced these states, if they wanted to pass new laws on voting, to go to the Justice Department and prove it was necessary. And John Roberts said, don't have to do that anymore. That very afternoon is when Texas enacted its a voter ID bill that required a form of identification to vote that they knew that 600,000 Latinos in the state did not have. That very week is when Mississippi and Tennessee and North Carolina moved at these bills. Things hadn't changed in the South. Things hadn't changed one bit. And it's only gotten worse over the course of this last decade. So we need these two laws, and we need them desperately, because things on voting are worsening, and they're worsening quickly, and we are set up. You know, it sounds wild to say it, but we are set up exactly as Dwight says. We are set up to become South Africa in 2024, and everybody who is shocked and horrified by that ought to be paying attention to exactly what is happening in state legislatures right now, and exactly what this means for the future of this country.
Well, to show you that it's not hyperbole, Dwight, I'll give you the last word. The last minute will belong to you. Remember, South Africa was based upon American Jim Crow. Dwight McKee.
Yes, it is. And everything in Biden's history and policy, that's how they want to maintain the status quo. It's policy. In that same direction. His immigration policy is not that different than Trump's immigration policy. It is very clear to those of us who understand what priorities look like in government and in politics that the voting rights bill is not his priority. His priority has been able to give as little as he can to get as much as he can from the black community. Is that he wants our vote and for us to fight for his administration, but yet he does not want to fight for our equity in those things which are important to us. He sacrificed time in behalf of his own, which is always, to me, again, playing to the Trump crowd. He plays to the right at our expense. And though now I respect Latasha and Stacy and that crowd for having a backbone now to stand up and say they're going to boycott, we had this debate before to say you all cannot impose these people on us who have a history of working against us without putting on the table what they're going to do for us before you convince us to vote for them.
Because after you vote, it's over. Everybody.
Remember we had the discussion.
Absolutely. I've got to run out to a hard break. We're going to continue to talk through the break. We had this discussion in 2020 during the primary season. Boy, before you get who you want, you better get what you need. Always do that. Dating is not, this is about power. This is not about love. John Nichols coming up on the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Dwight, you said it, and just so that you know, David, it was a well, you were here. It was a debate through the whole primary process. It was like you need someone who's going to fight for you, because once you vote, that's it. And wow, look at what's happened.
Biden was the weakest of all of the major nominees on voting rights and democracy issues throughout the primaries. This was not something that he had paid much attention to. It was something that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker and Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg, whatever their strengths and weaknesses on other issues might be, were very aware of the problems here. And Biden came late to the table on this. He was, I believe, the last of the major candidates to have a democracy platform as part of his website. And you can see the lack of urgency.
John Nichols is up.
But we know him, and he likes us, and he understands pain. I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Yeah, I said it. I said it, and I'll add more to it before I take anything away. We were in South Carolina when that happened. I love Congressman Clyburn, but I was like, this is not, you don't vote for someone with tears in your eyes. This is crazy. This is crazy. John Nichols, how you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Great. You know Dave Daly, brilliant best-selling author of Rat Effed, the best-selling title whose name we dare not call lest we get pushed off radio and TV. Oh, my father had so much fun with that, just so that you know. And Dwight McKee, he and Aline Walker were the youngest founding board members of Operation Push back in 1971. And he, of course, is with the National Action Network. And, of course, you never leave Push. But it's a great social scientist. And, of course, it's the brilliant John Nichols, Brother John. People are in Atlanta today, and folks are not happy with President Biden, but we're going to keep on going because now we got January 6th. That's a mess, too. My mother and I were talking about this yesterday. She said, I don't think you all understand what you're looking at.
I don't think they do. I think there's the sad part about it is that, we're being very polite. And so everybody's saying, oh, the January 6th committee is doing all this great stuff, right? Well, it's a year later. A year has passed, and we just figured something out. That's not how it's supposed to work. I mean, the sense of urgency is missing there. It's not present. And a lot of time is passing. The energy is dissipating. And instead of cracking down on the people who did wrong.
60 seconds.
Many of the people who were actively involved in the coup plot are sitting in Congress,
the energy's gone. The energy's gone on this.
I know.
It's gone.
A disaster.
Energy's gone on this. Dwight, are you still there?
I know it.
Still here.
Look, David, are you still there?
David dropped.
Okay. I have a couple of questions I have a couple of callers, John, that with respect to voting rights. Do you mind if I go to them before we make this pivot?
Yes, we do.
Because I'd like for you to speak to that as well. given the president's speech today. Got a lot to talk about, Sir Sidney, all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
All right.
Well, we can close out with Sir Sidney. I'll give you a couple of minutes to.
Well, we'll do it however you want to do it.
Yeah,
I'm always at your...
10 seconds.
Well, I think it would be great to close with a tribute to him.
He is very being very under-recognized for his political activism. There was he and...
stand by.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, bottom of the hour, 7:30. You know what time it is. It's John Nichols' time. National correspondent for The Nation magazine, of course. He is a brilliant author. We have been loving his book, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. But, he's going to have to come back and talk to us about his new book. Didn't know about this. You snuck this one in on me. The Coronavirus Criminals and Pandemic Profiteering. I'm like, wait a minute, you and Chuck Collins sounded just alike.
Well, Chuck is in the book.
Got to be.
As are a lot of other good souls. And we really do talk about how even in the midst of one of the most jarring moments in our history, a bunch of folks set out to make money, make massive amounts of money, and to achieve political goals rather than to take care of people who were sick. It's an old story, but it is a really tragic one.
Oh, it's very, very real, and we need to talk about that as we paid for the vaccines, and we are paying to get well. I mean, it's just criminal, and that's why we need to have a discussion about Medicare for all. All this stuff needs to be on the table right now. But we got a lot to talk about today.
We're talking about voting rights now.
Yeah, but you got to come back and talk, because I really want us to talk about this book, about these coronavirus criminals. You are so alliterative. I love it. But before we go, I love it. Let me go to Andre from Chicago, who called about voting rights, because I know you can weigh in on that too. And of course, Dwight decided he was going to hang out with us, Dwight McKee. So let's get right to it. Andre, what's on your mind today, sweetie?
Hey, good morning, Santita, and good morning to the guests. Good morning to Dwight. I just called because I wanted to ask Dwight, what is the alternative? Because he said that we should have considered Joe Biden before we gave him a vote. But what were our alternatives for the Democratic nominee? What other choice did we have to vote for somebody? Pretty much, you had a lot of candidates running, but who could win? Now, Bernie Sanders was defeated. So what choice did we have, and how could we calculate saying to Joe Biden that we want this before your vote, knowing that he had to go there and deal with Republican-dominated Congress? So, Dwight, what is the alternative?
Well, Dwight, and thank you so much for calling, Andre. The Democratic establishment came in on Bernie Sanders. They did it to reverend. They decided that he was going to lose, and they took him out. Bernie didn't lose; he was taken out. You need to know that. Dwight, why don't you speak to him, and then you, John?
Well, it is the answer. I mean, they sabotaged Bernie. Bernie had the momentum. He had the young vote. He had expanded the party. And he was a very, very, very viable candidate. But they sabotaged him, as they do every time he runs, to make sure that the same thing they did to Reverend Jackson is they triangulated him, took him out so that they could have the established candidates there. But I talked about one of the things I said about they was talking about what is this? They playing chess and we playing checkers, and I said no, this is not a game of chess or checkers. This is a game of cards. You have to put everything on the table in this game. You have to be willing to hold them or fold them. But this is the big time. You playing for all of the marbles in this. And so you have to tell him on the front side, we will vote for you, but we want you to make a list, and we're going to check it twice of here's what we expect from you. We can't vote for you because you're a nice guy and we like you. We have to vote for you because you know what we want to do, and then we all fight this fight together. Otherwise, Bernie and Warren becomes viable candidates. But this is poker. This is not checkers or chess. You have to be able to be willing to put everything on the line. And everybody has to have some equity in the game, some risk in the game.
You know, Arlene said Bernie would never have won the general election, much less the primary. He just doesn't appeal to the vast majority of black voters. I think if he'd kept on talking, he would have. You know, because the mainstream media determined that too. I mean, John Nichols.
Well, they said that real quickly. They said that Obama.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dwight. You were finishing your point.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm saying, but they Obama that he had no appeal to the black people, and then that thing flipped, and then he became the favorite.
Mm-hmm. Once he won with white people, he became appealing to black people. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
John Nichols?
Let me just jump in here and a couple things to throw in. First off, the polling data showed that Bernie Sanders ran as stronger against Trump than Joe Biden. And so I think one of the things that we need to understand is that Sanders actually was a very viable alternative. Wasn't necessarily the best. People can, choose among the other candidates. There's quite a good list there. But Sanders was certainly viable. And the interesting thing about Sanders that I'll just put in the mix here is that he was incredibly poorly covered by the media. They didn't tell his full story well. They didn't tell that he had been, a civil rights activist as a young man, that he had gone to the March on Washington, that he had been arrested in open housing demonstrations in the early 1960s, that he had 100% voting rights and civil rights record. And frankly, that he had a lot of ideas that were very appealing. Had he become the nominee, in particular if he'd chosen wisely for a vice presidential candidate, I would argue that he would have chosen an African American woman, perhaps not Kamala Harris, perhaps someone else like Congresswoman Bass. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, I think Bernie Sanders would have had a broad appeal. I think he would have done very, very well, and frankly, I think he would have won. But to the deeper question here, and this is the vital one. It's important to understand that when we're talking about an issue like voting rights, an issue like democracy itself, the supporters of voting rights have to become much more determined in their demands. And I'll give you an example that some people may not like, but look at what the anti-abortion movement has done. They have said to Republicans, if you're elected, you need to deliver for us. And if you don't deliver, we will remove you. We will punish you. It's a simple calculus there. And Donald Trump recognized that. And he is, as someone who had no record of being an opponent of abortion, when he became president, he delivered for them in Supreme Court nominations, in policy, everything that they demanded, because he feared them. He feared that they would abandon him or that they would oppose him. And the simple reality is that I don't think Democrats, the advocates for voting rights, advocates for democracy, in the same way. I don't think they see any kind of pressure from advocates, or feel that they face any kind of pressure from advocates for democracy. And so they compromise again and again and again. And they frankly lose sight of, they lose sight of their own best interests, but also they lose sight of the grassroots. And I think we're seeing it right now. Look at this. We are 1 year into the Biden administration, for almost a year into the Biden administration. And this core central issue, the first issue introduced in Congress, is still unaddressed. We still are in a situation where, frankly, we are looking at extreme gerrymandering. We are looking at voter suppression laws in states across the country. And now we're looking at a rising movement, as the Brennan Center points out, of people who propose to actually overturn elections if they don't like the results. And this is mission critical. This is break the glass and sound the alarm moment. And yet we're still talking about who will do a vote on this day, and if we don't like what we see, maybe we'll come back and finally talk about the filibuster. And the worst thing of all right now is that Susan Collins and several Republicans are working with Manchin on a incredibly compromised bill about elections that I fear will become the vehicle that everybody says, okay, well, this is the thing we can agree on, so we'll push this through. And it's a half step. It doesn't begin to address all the issues that are in play. But I have genuine fears that we're going to come out of this Congress with minimal election protection, with minimal efforts to address, with no efforts to address gerrymandering, and minimal efforts to address these efforts to overturn elections.
Well, what
It's
about
a scary moment?
well, what about January 6th? I mean, we had Dr.
January
Max
6th
Wolf on with us last week, and he said, "I don't call this an insurrection. I call it treason." I said,
Well,
yeah,
it was a coup.
that's
I mean, we should call it what it was, a coup. And the fact of the matter is that a sitting president was defeated in an election, and he sought to have his followers attack, encourage his followers to, march on and attack the Capitol of the United States to upend and overturn the counting of the electoral votes in that election. If we read that story from any other country around the world, we would say that there was a coup attempt, right? I mean, there's no doubt of that. It's not a complicated thing. And what country in the world would avert a coup attempt and then not hold the plotters to account? I mean, imagine that. I mean, we're a year on now from January 6th, and people who were actively involved in, organizing things, in calculating, in calling the marchers to at the rally on January 6th, calling on them to go to the Capitol to fight, all of this, and they have not been held to account. The only people being held to account are the lunatics, right? The people who went into the Capitol wearing, like outlandish clothing and did, incredibly irresponsible and damaging and dangerous things. But they weren't the plotters. They're not the ones who actually, kind of drove this thing.
But wait a minute, but John, we don't know who they are. I mean, that's part of the problem here. You had the Capitol Police, most of them were not there that day. Yes. You also have them calling the FBI, the Pentagon, they're calling everybody. They could get no response. Now, there's something really unsettling, I'll put it charitably, about that. When the Pentagon doesn't respond to a coup attempt on Capitol Hill, are you serious? When the FBI does not respond to a coup attempt on Capitol Hill, are you serious? When Governor Hogan from Maryland sends his National Guard, they're waiting at the bridge because he's so alarmed, because Washington, D.C. is really, we call it the DMV, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Literally, it is a district in between Maryland and Virginia. That's what it is. So the Maryland governor, a Republican, sent the National Guard. He deployed them so they could get across, because they were literally at the bridge, which is like 5 minutes away. I mean, come on. What is this?
That's exactly right. Well, look, what this is a slow walk, right? And I don't necessarily mean that Nancy Pelosi and others intend it to be a slow walk, but they've created it as such. And so we're a year on, right? And we haven't acted upon the things that we knew we could and should act on January 7th. Remember, one thing I just remind you of is back in January of 2021, you had Republicans saying that people had to be held to account. Now, they all got scared of Trump, and they all moved off their strong language. But the fact of the matter is that a year ago, you had the moment where it was time to act, right, where it was clearly necessary. You had the major daily newspapers in Missouri saying that Josh Hawley, as an example, the senator from Missouri, should either resign or be removed. You had, members of the U.S. Senate saying that Hawley and Ted Cruz should either resign or be removed from the Senate. You had in the House, very clear evidence that Mo Brooks and others participated in the rally and in the calls for the insurrection just as much as Trump did. And yet no accountability for them. They're still sitting in the chamber, still sitting on committees the whole bit. And so what we've ended up with is a situation where instead of a sense of urgency, we've had a sense of, kind of, oh, well, we certainly got to get the record straight. We'll have to figure out what happened. Maybe we'll take a year to do that. Maybe we'll take 2 years to do that. Maybe someday we'll produce a report like Robert Mueller did, and it won't get us anywhere. And this is dereliction of duty on the part of the leadership of the Democratic Party, and frankly on the part of any responsible Republicans. There should have been action back in January of 2021 to hold those who were engaged in insurrection, who were engaged in a coup attempt, to account. And the accountability is very clear. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution, Section 3, says that if you swear an oath to defend the Constitution as an elected officer, as president, vice president, member of Congress, member of the cabinet, and you then participate in an insurrection or give aid and comfort to those who are engaged in insurrection, then you can no longer serve in public office. That's the Constitution of the United States. That's not some theory. That's not some, idea that popped into somebody's head. That's the core document of this country, and it wasn't followed. Coup plotters, insurrectionists, people who gave aid and comfort to the insurrection were not held to account. And there you have the only people who were saying it right. I shouldn't say the only ones, but the leading people who were saying it right back in January of 2021. Representative Cori Bush from Missouri, who introduced a resolution saying, what about the 14th Amendment? Why aren't we, holding members of Congress to account if they were participants in it? Maxine Waters, a handful of others who said the right thing, but they were not given the go-ahead. They were not given the power to move their resolutions and to make things happen. And so we've ended up a year later with a slow walk.
So what does that say about not only, not Congress, the people who are in it? Because they're the ones who are holding up, who are upholding this, not just it. I mean, this is an attack upon the republic. They keep saying the democracy. Yeah. No. That's a form of government. Our government is a republic. It's a constitutional republic, which was quite a leap from the constitutional monarchy that we left, which is what England has today. So now this was an attack upon the republic, and it is expanding, John. And no one in the corporate media are saying nothing. And if you talk about it, you are like the little, oh my goodness, you're like the little pea in the bedroom, the princess in the pea. You're the little irritant. Why don't you just shut up and let this go?
Or the kid who said the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
Right? This is
the bug in my ear.
All of our exactly all of our mythologies and all of our children's tales that so often had wisdom to them. Look, here's the bottom line. I don't want to punish anybody unfairly. I certainly think that it is necessary to get the facts, to be clear on who did wrong, and not to hold people who didn't do wrong to account, but to hold those who did to account. In this situation, though, we have video of these people saying these things. It's not like you have to do a year-long inquiry or a 2-year-long inquiry. The evidence is right there. And what's amazing to me is that Democrats in the House of Representatives and 10 Republicans, roughly 10, 11 Republicans, quickly recognized that you had to impeach Trump because you had the video, right? It was there. I mean, there was no question of that. But you also had video of members of Congress at the same rally saying the same things. And they haven't been held to account.
But they were they took the people on a tour the day before. When we were you couldn't go into Congress at that time. It was closed. Are you serious?
I know, your jaw drops, right? I mean, it is just...
No, it didn't. You know what? Wait. All the lights between the Lorraine Motel and West Memphis, Arkansas, went green for a petty criminal named James Earl Ray, who says, I didn't kill Dr. King, and I believe he didn't. I mean, we play a lot of games here. Sirhan was in front of Robert Kennedy, but he was shot from behind. Really? Come on. I'm not a conspiracist. I have to look at these things, because this is something I had to live under the threat of all of my life. They need to stop playing these games. Any form of government is a really fragile thing. We are reminded by Robert Patillo all the time when he comes on this show that modern France is on its fifth republic. John?
That's right. Yeah.
This
So
thing the
awful
wheels
notion
could come
about-
off of this thing.
Well, the wheels are coming off.
Okay.
I mean, look, we need to be very clear that Donald Trump led a coup attempt in January of 2021. And a lot of people are worried about what happened on January 6th, 2021. They're still talking about it. And, MSNBC has reports on it and, blah, blah, blah. I'm worried about January 6th, 2025. The January 6th that comes after the next presidential election.
You mean where the general said
myself,
that we got a problem?
Well, and also where the simple reality here that what do we know? What do we know? Number one, Donald Trump, by all appearances, is running for president again. Number two, his supporters and allies have used their positions of power to change election rules to make it easier to advance the sort of absurd arguments that he advanced after the 2020 election. Number three, in the 2022 midterm elections, if more of his supporters win control of state legislatures and governorships across the country, they will advance their agenda of making it easier to challenge and even to overturn elections. And finally, if Donald Trump does indeed run for re-election in 2024, he will be the Republican nominee. There's simply no question he has control of that party. And in November of 2024, whether he wins or loses, he will claim victory. And he will pursue a January 6th strategy. Now, the question we should be asking ourselves is, what are we as a country doing to assure that, just as we averted a coup on January 6th, 2021, we will avert a coup and make sure that it doesn't happen on January 6th, 2025. I would argue we are not doing enough.
We're talking with John Nichols from The Nation magazine about January 6th and why we must proceed, why we cannot wait, why you need to still be concerned about January 6th. This Congressman Benny Thompson and this House Select Committee are not on a fool's errand. They are really trying to find out what happened and hold people to account for this attack on the Republic, the attempted coup. They were trying to confirm the election. They had to stop it, everybody. Don't forget that. But, I've got a couple of minutes left. And you
Benny
wanted
Thompson
to...
needs to be given power.
Absolutely.
Benny Thompson needs to be given more power to do more. What he's doing is good. But boy, he can't have his arm tied behind his back. He's got to have the freedom to use both hands on this and to take it where it needs to go.
And if they wanted him to have it, they'd give it to him. They're not serious about this.
That's right.
And that is what's dangerous. The last couple of minutes belong to you. You wanted to draw our attention to Sir Sidney Poitier.
Yes, who's gotten good recognition at his passing at the age of 94. But because he did so much so long ago, almost 60 years ago, people lose sight of it. And it's important to remember that Sir Sidney Poitier was born in Miami, actually, but raised in the Bahamas. And he was a Bahamian. And his films, when he was a young man in the early 1950s, were banned in the Bahamas because they portrayed Black people as not just, side characters or weak characters, but as strong and dynamic figures. And the Bahamian white elites and the power elites there did not want that image to come across in the theaters. His films were also banned in Southern theaters for the same reason in the United States. Because of that, political movements forged to actually argue that his films should be seen. Out of those political movements came, more political activism, more dynamism, demands for the end to white rule and to minority rule in the Bahamas. He was actually, if you talk to Bahamians, they will tell you he was really a central figure in supporting and encouraging the rise of democracy and of people's movements in the country, which he claimed as a part of his own history and his legacy. In the United States, with his close friend Harry Belafonte, he didn't just go to the March on Washington in 1963. He raised huge amounts of money to support the civil rights movement in the South, and he went south with Belafonte to deliver that money personally. He was there at Resurrection City after Dr. King was shot for the Poor People's Campaign in 1968. This is someone who showed up, gave money, lent his name and his good words and thoughts to many, many justice causes over the years. We ought to remember that, as we also remember his remarkable artistry.
And his body of work reflected all of that. I encourage you to look at Buck and the Preacher, the work that he did with Bill Cosby. Everything he did lifted our people, black people, marginalized people, working people. Everything he did lifted all of humanity. Long may he live, Sir Sidney Poitier. Love you, John. Love you, Dwight. God bless you, everybody. Have a great day. Cosme, thank you for a great show. God bless. Oh, John. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Oh, we have so much on the table. I tell you, I'm so glad that you got the last.
Forget to take time for yourself. Acupuncture relieves stress, pain,
Cosme,
and treats all
can
sorts
we
of disorders
turn this down? I
safely
can't
and
hear
without
John.
side effects.
Oh, okay, thank you. John, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
I'm just so glad you got that last moment in on Sidney Poitier, because you know what? One of the other things he did that was really important. Remember, in Guest Is Coming to Dinner, he challenged white liberalism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he, just as Dr. King raised the issue, he said, well, yeah, you can say the right thing, but do you do the right thing? And so when you look at his body of work, and I know that at times he was criticized for not doing even more, and I understand that. But boy, the bottom line is that if you look at what he did over, more than 70 years as a prominent figure, again and again and again, he stood on the right side of history. And people forget he refused to sign the loyalty oath in the 1950s, something that actually undermined his career at critical points, because he would not, play that game. He was inspired early on by appearing in the film Cry the Beloved Country. He did a number of films, by the way, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s on apartheid. And it's one of the sub-themes. He was in a film in the 1970s with Michael Caine that was sharply critical of apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I just tell you, when you look across the whole of his career, and when you look at the issues that were touched on, and the fact that he ended his career playing, folks like Thurgood Marshall and Nelson Mandela, this is someone who, he got the point. He understood what he could do with his prominence and with his platform. And he used it again and again and again.
Sure. I mean,
if I can add this last little piece to that, and I think your analysis is brilliant, is that I don't think you can give any sufficient credit without mentioning both of their mentors, who was Paul Robeson.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, my friend. Yes. You're so right.
And his
yeah.
And Douglas Turner Ward.
Yep.
And Douglas Turner Ward for providing a platform. He stands on the shoulders. You're absolutely right, because they model themselves after Paul Robeson. But they needed a platform. And the Negro Ensemble Theater was that. But, we cannot say enough about R.C. Davis and Ruby Dee. I'm so happy that Maya Angelou is going to be on the quarter. She'll be the first African-American woman to be honored in that way. But R.C. Davis and Ruby Dee, we cannot forget. I remember one of the highlights of my young life, I will say. One day after the push meeting, Dwight and John, I had my piano lessons after the meeting. And my parents, said, well, you might miss it today because there's something really special. And they were having a screening. He and Mr. Belafonte were having a screening of Buck and the Preacher, a private screening, because they wanted to, of course, I didn't know. I was like 8 or 9. So, what did I know? But I did know, about indigenous peoples and their struggles, but the reflection, just the telling of the Black indigenous people story in that movie. And then, having my parents explain to me in the heat of the night, and when he slapped the white man in, but that was unscripted. He had to fight to do that. I mean, he got pushback from the filmmakers. They were like, no, you can't do that. He said, no.
And if you listen to his interviews from that time, it's very, very interesting because, and afterwards, what he said was that the way it was scripted, that he got slapped and he just took it.
Yeah.
Right? You know, the idea they had was you get slapped in the face and you just take it, right? Because you're strong. And they said, well, that'll be enough. It'll show your strength. And he said, no. If I take that slap in the face at this time and don't respond to it, I will harm every black person in this country who's fighting for civil rights. I will undermine their efforts to say, look, we are equal. And it was, if you, again, I can't begin to capture his remarkable skills to communicating about these things, but I will tell you that he thought about this. He thought about all of it. And I want to go back to Dwight's reference to Paul Robeson there. That's exactly right. I mean, and understand, when Harry Belafonte and, Sidney Poitier and others were hanging out with Paul Robeson, when they were going to his apartment in Manhattan, in Harlem, when they were learning from him, he was already targeted by the U.S. government. And, Robeson was already someone who was being pushed out of films, pushed off Broadway, pushed, frankly, ultimately out of the country. And yet these young actors learned from Robeson. And they didn't learn to, keep your head down or be careful. They learned to stand up and be strong and to take the hits sometimes, but to refuse to bend. And I think that Robeson's legacy, which I wrote about a lot, by the way, in the book on Henry Wallace, because Robeson and Belafonte were both very strong Henry Wallace backers in 1948. That legacy lives on, because Harry Belafonte is still with us and is still standing up. His statement on the death of Sidney Poitier was beautiful and one of love and solidarity. And so this long history is still with us, and we need to honor the people who recognized it and who took great risks along the way to carry on the Robeson legacy.
And whose work reflected that belief system. I can't say that enough. Their work reflected that belief system. Their work lifted people. Their work did not diminish any person. It lifted all, and in lifting a marginalized people, a hated people, a vilified people, they lifted all of humanity.
That's right.
And we have to, and their works will live on. Their works will live on.
Oh, very much. In fact, people are probably watching them more right this week than they have for a long time.
Good.
And that's a wonderful thing.
Good.
A new generation is being turned on.
Good. And they should.
I watched In the Heat of the Night last night. It's showing on HBO.
Fabulous.
That clip has gone viral, Dwight.
Sidney Poitier say they call me Mr. Teal.
Yeah.
And it resonates with us today. It resonates with us. It resonates with us today. And so, because
there's nothing about that's old-fashioned.
Ooh, no.
Sadly.
No. I mean, when you think of George Floyd on the ground begging for his life, that's what you see. You see, when you see Philando Castile, this is what you see. I mean, you just keep on going. It has not stopped. When you hear, I remember, and I'm not going to mention this man's name, I love him to pieces, but, certainly we had our political differences, but he became a friend. He said, the only thing I don't like about your father is that he's so arrogant, so puffed up. I said, So in my mind, and I can't repeat what I said in my mind, that's so he won't be your girlfriend. That's the point. Hello. And that is no slight against someone's sexuality. No. I don't have a problem with that at all, because you love who you love, and you love people, and you honor them. I'm talking about diminishing someone. I'm talking about a power game. That's what I mean. So he won't be that for you. So that's your problem with him. Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah. Like, I don't rape easy. It's all of that. See, we have to be very, very clear and thank God for the people who decide to stand up for us. And they do it at great risk to their careers. They do. But you know what? I had the opportunity, God bless him, of knowing, of having had, well, Billy Eckstein used to come to our house a lot. And our parents would let us hear some of his stories. You know, he was a very, very colorful character. And after a point, you left the room because you were a child and you didn't hear adult conversations. But one of the stories that he shared is one that I will never forget, John and Dwight, and it is this. Of course, he had matinee idol good looks, in addition to having an operatic voice. He was just everything. And he, like Lena Horne, was offered roles in Hollywood. But they were roles that he felt were diminishing, that were degrading to not just to him, but to black people, to black men. And he said, he said it wasn't even a thought. He said, of course I turned that stuff down. He was talking to my parents and to me, because he turned to me. He said, baby, I never would have been able to look my grandchildren in the eye. He said, you know how you watch those movies late at night? He said, yeah. If I had been in that movie, I never would have been able to look my grandbabies in the eye. So of course I turned them down. I turned those roles down. And I just went on the road and worked. And that's that. So, I think that we need to pay homage to these people and never forget them. Mm-hmm. Because we don't have that now. We don't. We have a lot of people who do they degrade our people, and they degrade all people. And that is just because, artists have become entertainers now. Now, I don't mind being entertained, but there's something special about an artist, the role of the artist in society. You know that essay. There's a real role for an artist in society. An artist is a truth teller. They also help you to fulfill your aspirations. That's why they are a star. They give you something to reach for. So may God bless Sir Sidney Poitier, and he was as much a gentleman in person as he was on the screen. He was a gentle man. And he was a girl dad, by the way. He had 6 daughters. Yeah. He was a great girl dad. God bless him.
Very, very a testament to him. And well, I apologize. I have to head out. But I'm so glad we took this little extra time to talk about that legacy.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm so glad to
be on with Dwight, whose wise contributions are always so vital.
Well, he wanted to stay on with you because he really loves your work, and so he just wanted to hear.
I appreciate it.
I really do.
I appreciate it. And anybody who brings up Paul Robeson gets us right to where we need to be.
Well, maybe one day we should have that talk, John.
Should.
I think that we should.
Who's a big Paul Robeson fan, who really wants to talk about Paul Robeson a lot is Danny Glover.
Well, why don't we do that one day?
Holds out a vision of doing a documentary or doing some kind of film on Robeson.
Why don't we do that?
I would do it.
Let's do that. Let's have that conversation because I think we can pick up on some of these ideas that you and I had before the pandemic hit, right? I think we should do that. We should do that. And so let's
in those ancient days.
In those ancient days, the days before we wore the mask that grins and hides. I'm listening to Claude McKay in my head right now. We wear the mask. Boy, oh boy. God bless you.
Send you love and solidarity.
Much love to you and your beautiful family.
Yeah, God bless you as well. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We can still say that for a little while more, I think.
Whew.
Take care of you too.
Thank you. God bless you. Bye-bye. Dwight, is there anything else you want to say before we go?
No. I remember
Billy Eckstein
being at your house. And I remember what a personality he was.
Wasn't he?
And he was. And I was very surprised to hear how colorful his language was.
Yep.
He was
He was a tough one. You were like, Few people, my grandma Gertrude, go, oh my gosh, Mr. B. Mr. B's downstairs.
But I also, I could deal with those gangsters.
But that's
real.
That's what. But
Bill Eckstein was Real deal.
In the clubs, you had to deal with the gangsters because they ran show business. And so, but he was time enough for them and he did not play. But he also did not play about his image as a black man. He did not play. He did not relent. He would not move. He was a black man and he honored our people. And I thank God for that. I will never forget him saying, I never would have been able to look my grandchildren in the eye. As I thought about that, he had that kind of foresight. He had that kind of principle. He said, I'm not going to do these roles. There's no way. There's no way that I will do this. This will hurt my children's children. Thank God for that. Thank God for that. And it takes that kind of, in whatever space you occupy, it takes that kind of dedication. It takes that kind of principle. There's some people who turn things down. Who just say, no, this is insulting and this is assaulting. This will hurt us. And and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I have mad respect for that. People who turn down the big bucks in real time, but they live for all time. Dr. King died broke financially. He died hated. But guess what? Before they unveiled that statue on the mall, they had an earthquake, Dwight. Remember? And a hurricane. Remember that? In D.C., all in the same 3 days. Unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up. So you better get right. You all better get right. Get right. You can kill a person, but you cannot kill an idea. And you cannot kill an ideal. Paul Robeson died broke. But he didn't die broken. God bless him. And those are the people I will follow. Money comes and goes. It doesn't even matter. It's the principle. My father often says, only what you do for Christ will last. He said, I am not going to leave you a lot of money. I didn't make it. The money he made, he gave to Push. The building, all that stuff was bought on his speaking engagements. My brothers, my sister, and I all went to college on full scholarships that we earned. Didn't think he lived to pay the tuition, but my mother asked me, if you to take this, please take this burden off of me. I need you to go through this high school. I need you to finish at the top of the class. I know you can do it. You have to work hard. But I need that because if something happens, if the bottom drops out, which was assassination, I need you to be able to pay for college. I need you to do that. It takes that kind of dedication. My father and my mother twinned them. When you see him, you see her. When you see her, you see him. It takes that kind of dedication to move the need for people. It takes that kind of dedication and it takes that kind of principle. And you can't be selfish. Everybody looks at Rosa Parks, Dwight, and they look at Mrs. Till. They look at all these people through this glamorous lens now. These people led hard lives. Rosa Parks was chased out of Alabama. She was forced to leave. The black community even turned their backs on her. They were like, you are too hot to be here. You need to get out. It was John Conyers, Congressman Conyers, who saved her and gave her a job so she would not be destitute. He refused to let that happen to that woman.
Yep.
Dwight, am I telling the truth?
Yep.
Then they tried to walk him out of Congress in dishonor. You gotta be kidding me. And then they let some of these other people,
And even then, some of the gangsters came along and robbed her.
Absolutely. In her neighborhood, beat her. Just about 10, 15 years before her death. I mean, come on. So we got to think about this, everybody. We really do. We have to and start honoring people when they're alive, for heaven's sake. But let's look at what is at stake. January 6th is a big deal. It is a big deal. Voting rights is a big deal. Getting what you need from a candidate up front is a big deal. You're right, Priscilla. Jesus died broke. But that's it. And hated. And it's a common thread. But he wasn't broken. And he did not resort to hatred. He was loving. And that is when he was received back into the arms of the Father. When he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. The heavens opened up and he ascended. So just remember that. So let's keep those things in mind. I love you all. So everybody, please spread the word about the show. Spread the word about the show. Go over to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and share over there. Like and share. And take this show and spread it today. Forward it to your friends. We have a good time over here. I love you, love you, love you. I don't know what was offensive. I don't know. Well, Flora said that I've been blocked on Facebook. I have. My numbers they have dropped them. It's very interesting because it's very interesting, but we're going to work on that. We're going to work on that, everybody. I love you. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow, Lord willing, on the Santita Jackson Show. Love you, Dwight. Love you, Coast Mate. God bless you, everybody. Have a good one.
All right.
Bye-bye.